My parents spent my entire childhood telling me I would never become anything. They laughed at my dreams, compared me to everyone around me, and made sure I believed I would always fall short. Years later, they walked into a glass tower in downtown Boston asking to meet the CEO, never imagining that the woman behind that desk was the same daughter they had dismissed for most of her life. What happened next changed all of our lives forever. If this story means something to you, please support the channel by subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing it with someone who may need it. My name is Elena Vale. I am 32 years old and I live in Boston. From the outside, my life probably looks calm, polished, and successful. People see my career, my home, and the confidence I carry now, and they assume I must have grown up in a family that believed in me deeply. The truth is, nothing like that. I was not raised with encouragement. I was raised with doubt. In my house, it felt like I had to earn the right to take up space. No matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. My parents, Leonard and Marissa Vale, always found some reason to criticize me. If I brought home strong grades, they said the exams were probably easy. If I did something difficult, they shrugged and said anyone could have done it. They never celebrated my effort because they never expected very much from me in the first place. At the same time, my younger brother, Tristan, was treated like he was golden. Praise came to him freely, even when he had done almost nothing to earn it. If he did something small, my parents reacted as if he had accomplished something extraordinary. I still remember sitting at the dinner table listening to them talk about how bright his future would be while treating me like I was invisible. All I wanted was for them to look at me the same way just once. I wanted to hear them say they were proud of me. That moment never came. As I got older, I realized I could not change the way they saw me. The problem was not that I was not trying hard enough. The problem was that they had already decided who I was, and nothing I did would change that. That realization was painful, but it planted something inside me. I stopped chasing their approval and started thinking seriously about my own future. I made a promise to myself. One day, I would build a life that nobody could take away from me. I would prove to myself that their opinion was not the truth. By high school, I no longer expected compliments, but I still hoped results might matter. I stayed up late studying while other students enjoyed their evenings. I took advanced classes, entered competitions, and applied for every scholarship I could find. My teachers believed in me, and their words meant more than they probably realized because I heard so little kindness at home. Then, during my senior year, all of that effort finally paid off. I received several scholarship offers from colleges in different states. For one brief moment, I believed my parents might finally be happy for me. Instead, they acted as if it were nothing unusual. A few days later, I discovered something that changed the way I saw my family forever. My grandparents had quietly opened a college savings account for me years earlier, wanting to help with the costs that scholarships would not cover. I had no idea how much was in it because my parents managed the account. When I asked about the money, their faces changed. Then they admitted it was gone. Every dollar had been spent. They had used my college savings to cover one of Tristan's failed business ideas. I could barely process what I was hearing. I asked them how they could make that decision without even talking to me. My father looked right at me and said, "Tristan has more potential than you do. This was the better investment." My mother agreed without hesitation. That night, I packed a small suitcase and accepted a scholarship offer from a university hundreds of miles away. The morning I left, there were no hugs, no tears, and no promises to visit. I closed the front door behind me with one clear thought in my head. If I wanted a better life, I would have to build it without the people who were supposed to love me most. College was only the beginning. My scholarship covered tuition, but not everything else. Rent, books, food, transportation, and daily expenses were all on me. I worked mornings at a bakery and evenings at the university library. My days started before sunrise and often ended long after midnight. Some nights I slept only 3 or 4 hours. There were weeks when money was so tight that I skipped meals just to save enough for books or rent. I never told anyone because I did not want pity. Sometimes I watched classmates whose parents brought them groceries, helped with surprise expenses, or simply called to ask if they were okay. Those moments made me realize how much I had always gone without. Every now and then, I still called home, hoping distance might have changed something. It never had. My parents did not ask about my classes, my health, or my struggles. Instead, they told me college was probably too hard for me and said I would likely quit before graduation. At first, those words wounded me. But after a while, something shifted. Their criticism stopped sounding like truth and started sounding like fuel. Every exam I passed, every bill I managed to pay, every difficult week I survived became proof that they were wrong. I stopped waiting for encouragement that was never coming. I learned how to celebrate my own progress, even if that progress was nothing more glamorous than making it through another brutal week without breaking. By the end of my second year, I no longer felt like someone barely surviving. I felt like someone building a future with her own hands. Graduation day was not what I had imagined as a child. I did not have family waiting with flowers or balloons. I stood with my classmates, smiled for a few pictures, and reminded myself quietly that I had earned that moment. A week later, I moved to Boston after accepting an entry-level role at a fast-growing advisory firm called Northbridge Strategy Group. I was the newest person in the office, and I knew I had everything to prove. So I let my work speak for me. I arrived early, stayed late, volunteered for difficult assignments, and learned from every mistake. My managers noticed that I stayed calm under pressure. Coworkers came to me when they needed help untangling complicated problems. Senior leaders began to trust my judgment. A few years later, I earned my first promotion, then another, then another. Over time, people who had once trained me became my peers, and eventually I was leading projects that shaped the future of the entire firm. Some people were surprised by how quickly I rose, but they did not see the quiet years underneath every success. They did not see the exhausted student racing between jobs, the young woman counting coins for groceries, or the daughter who had learned to keep going without applause. I never felt the need to brag, because deep down I already knew that no title or award would suddenly bring me the approval I had spent years craving from my parents. From time to time, I heard updates about Tristan. He bounced from one job to another, always convinced the next opportunity would finally make him successful without requiring much effort. Whenever his plans failed, my parents blamed other people, bad timing, or plain bad luck. According to them, nothing was ever really his fault. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice sounded warmer than I remembered. A few minutes later, my father joined the call, and they both spoke kindly, so kindly it felt unnatural. Before the call ended, they asked if I would have dinner with them the following weekend because they wanted to reconnect as a family. Part of me wanted to believe them. Another part of me knew something was off. Still, I agreed. At dinner, they smiled, asked polite but vague questions, and finally revealed the truth. Tristan had started another business, and it was collapsing. Debts had piled up, creditors were demanding payment, and my parents believed I could help. Maybe I could use my business connections. Maybe I knew someone who would invest. Maybe I could somehow save him. In that moment, I understood exactly why they had suddenly wanted to reconnect. They had not come back because they missed me. They had come back because they needed something. I kept my voice calm, smiled politely, and told them I would think about it. They looked relieved. They had no idea I already knew exactly what I was going to do. A few days later, I called my father and told him it would be better if he and my mother came to my office the following Tuesday morning. That Tuesday, they arrived at our downtown building and were immediately surprised. The lobby was larger than they expected. The company name on the stone wall made it clear this was no small operation. An assistant led them to the elevator, then up to the executive floor, where the offices were lined with glass walls, polished wood, and private conference rooms. Finally, they were guided to the largest office at the end of the hall. I was already inside, seated behind my desk and reviewing a report. I looked up, smiled, and invited them in. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. Their eyes drifted around the room, the view, the nameplate on the desk, and finally, me. My father stared at the plaque and then back at me, as if his mind could not connect what his eyes were seeing. My mother whispered my name softly, almost as if she were asking the room whether this was real. I stood, walked over, shook their hands the way I would greet formal visitors, and invited them to sit. My father finally asked whether there had been some kind of mistake. I told him there had not. I said, "You are exactly where you are supposed to be. This is my office, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of Northbridge Strategy Group." The silence that followed felt heavy. The same people who had spent years dismissing my work and mocking my ambition were now sitting across from me, unable to hide their shock. For the first time in my life, they were not looking down on me. They were looking up. My mother smiled nervously and said she had always known I would do well. My father quickly added that they were proud of the woman I had become. Those were words I had wanted as a child, words I once would have done almost anything to hear. But sitting there in that office, I felt no triumph, only sadness. Their praise sounded less like truth and more like an attempt to rewrite history. So I asked one simple question. When exactly did you believe in me? They had no answer. I reminded them of the night I learned my college savings had been spent on Tristan's failed business. I reminded them of my father's words when he said my brother had more potential than I did, and that he was the better investment. I reminded them of the birthdays they barely acknowledged, of my graduation they never attended, and of the dreams they laughed at when I was young. I told them mistakes happen once or twice, but years of choosing one child over another are something else entirely. Then my father cleared his throat and steered the conversation back to Tristan. He asked whether my company could invest in the business or help pay the debts before everything collapsed completely. I answered calmly. I had already reviewed the information they provided. The numbers were clear. Tristan's business had been losing money for a long time, and the causes were poor decisions, not bad luck. Investing in a failing company without a viable plan would be irresponsible to my firm, my employees, and every client who trusted us. My father said, "Family should always help family." I replied, "Real help is not the same as rescuing someone from every consequence. If Tristan never has to face the results of his actions, nothing will change." My mother asked whether I was refusing because I wanted revenge. I shook my head. I told her revenge would have been using my position to make them feel small, and that had never been my goal. I had invited them there because I wanted them to understand who I had become. I was not saying no out of anger. I was saying no because it was the right decision. I wished Tristan well, but his rebuilding had to begin with accountability. Then I walked them to the door. Before they left, I told them I truly hoped things would get better for them, and I meant it. When the door closed behind them, I realized something important. The greatest victory was not becoming successful. It was reaching a point where I could make the right choice without allowing the past to make it for me. A few weeks later, Tristan called me. We had not spoken in a long time, so I almost ignored it. But when I answered, his voice sounded different, tired, humbled. He did not ask for money. He only said he wanted to talk. We met at a small coffee shop in Cambridge. He looked exhausted, older somehow. After a long silence, he admitted something I never expected to hear. He said our parents had spent his whole life protecting him from every mistake. Whenever something went wrong, someone else stepped in to fix it. Because of that, he never learned how to deal with consequences, how to think long-term, or how to stand on his own. Hearing him say that stunned me. It was the first time I had ever heard him take real responsibility for anything. We talked for nearly an hour. I did not criticize him. I did not revisit every wound. I just listened. Before we parted, he thanked me for refusing to save him. He said he finally understood why I had done it. Not long after that, my parents started calling more often. This time, they were not asking for favors. They apologized, more than once. They admitted they had treated me unfairly for years and said they wished they could change the past. I appreciated hearing it, but I also knew regret cannot erase years of hurt. I told them I accepted their apology because I did not want to carry anger forever. But forgiveness does not instantly restore trust. Trust takes years to build and only moments to destroy. Slowly, we began speaking from time to time. I kept healthy boundaries. I no longer felt responsible for fixing everyone's problems or meeting expectations that had never been fair to begin with. My life finally had peace in it, and I wanted to protect that peace. As the months passed, I kept leading my company and building the future I had worked so hard to create. I also began mentoring younger employees who reminded me of the person I used to be. Some came from difficult families. Others struggled with self-doubt because they had spent years being told they were not enough. Whenever I saw someone carrying that invisible weight, I reminded them that another person's opinion does not get to define their future. That became one of the most meaningful parts of my life. Real success is not only about reaching the top, it is also about becoming the kind of person who helps someone else believe they can rise too. When I look back now, I realize my parents' lack of faith in me could have destroyed my future if I had let it. Instead, it became one of the reasons I kept going when life became unbearable. Every challenge taught me patience. Every disappointment built resilience. Every lonely season sharpened my ability to keep moving when no one was watching. I never wanted another person to feel as unseen as I once did. So I chose to become the kind of leader who listens carefully, encourages honestly, and gives people the fair chance I always needed. There was a time when I believed rejection from the people closest to me must mean there was something fundamentally missing in me. But rejection is not always a reflection of your worth. Sometimes it is simply a reflection of someone else's blindness. Some people are so committed to the story they have told themselves about you that they would rather lose you than revise their opinion. Healing, I learned, is not forgetting. Healing is remembering without collapsing. It is telling the truth about what happened without letting it poison everything that comes next. Forgiveness, when it comes, is not always about restoring closeness. Sometimes it is simply releasing your own heart from the burden of carrying old fire. If you are listening to this and you come from a family where love was unequal, conditional, or cold, I want to tell you something clearly. What happened to you may explain some of your wounds, but it does not predict your ending. You may have been underestimated. You may have been dismissed. You may have sat in rooms where someone else was celebrated while you were tolerated. But your worth does not shrink just because someone failed to recognize it. And if you are still in the middle of building your life right now, hear me on this. The invisible years count. The nights you keep going while exhausted count. The choices nobody applauds count. The discipline you practice in private is often the very thing that shapes the life others later call impressive. When my parents first walked into my office, they thought they were arriving to ask for a favor. They did not know they were also walking into a truth they had spent years avoiding. The daughter they had underestimated had become a woman they could not ignore. But what mattered even more than their shock was my peace. By then, I had already built a life I respected. Their realization was late. My healing no longer depended on it. Because real freedom begins the moment your sense of self stops waiting for permission from the people who once withheld love. Real freedom begins when your standards matter more than their approval. Real freedom begins when you stop asking those who hurt you to become the judges of your worth. By the time my parents finally saw me clearly, I no longer needed them to. I had already seen myself, and that changed everything.